The NHL trade deadline has come and passed, and as we all thought, the Sabres' big three UFAs have all been dealt. But before we go any further, I am feeling a little under the weather, but no matter what,
the show goes on! This is my home! They're gonna need a fucking wrecking ball to take me out of here!
I am here for you guys to do the NHL trade deadline. I am feeling a little under the weather, but the show must go on no matter what. As these is I don't want to say it's big news because it was a very underwhelming time for the Buffalo Sabres, but let's start with the first piece that was dealt on March 26th, and it was center Eric Staal, who got traded to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for a 3rd and 5th round pick. And I got to tell you, Staal was having one of the worst years of his career. Statistically, he had just 3 goals and 7 assists in 32 games played, which, again, is just one of the absolute worst years of his career. Father Time may have finally caught up with Eric Staal as his play has diminished and diminished quite badly this season as the season kept progressing. It just never seemed to work here in Buffalo. He never seemed to fit. He never seemed to want to be in Buffalo. So I did praise this trade. I liked this trade. You can check out one of my older podcasts at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the Sabres season. I did grade this a very good grade for GM Kevin Adams, who I thought that the Sabres brought in maybe a legitimate second-line center behind Jack Eichel, but things just never seemed to work out. Again, Eric Staal just never seemed to want to be here. And I don't know if it showed on the ice. He looked good sometimes, but as the season progressed, he just kept looking worse and worse and worse and older and older and older. And I got to tell you, acquiring 2 middle-round picks for an aging, underproducing player like Eric Staal, who is going to be a UFA at the end of the season, that is a pretty good deal, honestly. I graded this as a B+ for Kevin Adams, and as I said, the reason why I graded this as a B+ is because they got 2 draft picks for an aging, underperforming Eric Staal, a guy who's going to be a UFA at the end of the year. It was a good trade. This was a good trade for the Buffalo Sabres to make. It gives them more ammunition going into the 2021 NHL draft, whether they want to package those and move up in the draft. Maybe they can try to package something and get a player that can help right away. Whatever the case may be, not a bad start for Kevin Adams for the Buffalo Sabres as he traded away center Eric Staal. The second piece was, of course, Brandon Montour. He was traded on April 10th, just a couple days ago. I called this trade. I thought that they would get a little bit more for Brandon Montour. When I did my prediction video, again, you can go back and watch that. I think I did it last week or the week before. I thought that they would get a little bit more, maybe a middle round pick and a prospect, because of how desperate the Florida Panthers would be since Aaron Ekblad had their best defenseman had a season-ending injury, and them really in the thick of things in the NHL, about to go into the NHL playoffs. I thought that they would really want a puck-moving defenseman that could jump in on the offense, and he really did have a rough first part of the season, but over the past month, Brandon Montour really picked up his game. He had 4 goals and 5 assists for 9 points in his last 13 games. And I believe he had 7 points in his last 11 games. He has really, really picked it up in this past month offensively, which is his strong suit on the back end, puck moving. He was jumping into the play, creating lots of chances for the Buffalo Sabres. And with all that coming into play, the fact that they fired Ralph Kruger and it just looked like Granato unlocked guys like Brandon Montour, I thought that the Sabres would be able to get a little bit more for him than they really did. The Sabres only ended up getting a 3rd round pick for Brandon Montour from the Florida Panthers, and that was it. They didn't retain any of his salary at all, which I thought would set them up to potentially trade somebody like Cody Eakin and take on some of his salary to make him maybe a little bit more attractive to another team that wants like a depth center heading into the playoffs, a guy who's been in the playoffs, but that just didn't work out. The Sabres really only got a couple of deals done, Brandon Montour being one of those. And in this one, I graded this a C-. And why I graded it a C- is because, as I just stated, I really thought that the Sabres could probably press for more and get more from the Florida Panthers since they are so desperate with their starting, their best defenseman, Aaron Ekblad, going down with a season-ending leg injury. I really believed that they would be able to finesse a little bit more, whether it be a middle prospect or a lower-tier prospect to bring into the Buffalo Sabres. You know, but a draft pick is a draft pick, so we now have a couple of third rounders that we can use, and an extra fifth rounder in 2021. It's not the greatest draft, but again, you can use those to package and maybe trade for another guy in the draft. We're gonna have to wait and see. But the biggest name in this whole trade deadline area was, of course, Taylor Hall. And the Buffalo Sabres did not wait until the very end, the trade deadline at 3 p.m. on the 12th, to get this deal done. It was all over Twitter. They had been working on it, working very hard to get this deal done. And the Buffalo Sabres ended up trading Eric Staal, ended up trading Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar to the Boston Bruins in exchange for a second-round draft pick in 2021 and forward Anders Bjork. Now, that when you first look at this trade, I can absolutely understand the frustration. I was very frustrated. I thought the Sabres got fleeced in this trade, and realistically, they did get fleeced, but under all of the circumstances that are now coming out that we are looking at, it is understandable that the trade went the way it did for Kevyn Adams. He really did try to squeeze the absolute most out of this trade that he could. And, you know, he was in such a tough spot. And here's why he was in such a tough spot. One is Taylor Hall was severely underperforming as a Buffalo Sabre. He just did not look right from the get-go. He wasn't very good all around. He couldn't drive play. When Eichel was out, he was non-existent for the most part. And it just never worked out. It never seemed like there was any team chemistry. He didn't look quick. He wasn't, the puck-carrying, very aggressive winger that we thought that we were getting. And it never worked out for the Buffalo Sabres and Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall only had, 2 goals and 17 assists in 37 games. That's one of the worst years. I think it might be the worst year he's had in his entire career. So the fact that people really thought that we were going to get, myself included, thought that we were going to get a lot more for him than we did it's surprising, but not. It's surprising, but it's understandable that we didn't get more than we did. Another piece of the puzzle that we really didn't take into consideration is the fact that Taylor Hall had a no movement clause in his contract. That was the only way that the Sabres could get him to come to Buffalo on a 1-year deal. It would essentially set up a situation just like what we saw at the trade deadline, where he essentially got to pick the team that he went to, and that's what he did. He picked the Boston Bruins, and he said he would not waive his no-trade clause for any other team except for the Boston Bruins. That was the team that he picked. That was the team that he wanted to go to, and of course, that is what happens when you have a no-trade clause or a no-movement clause in your contract. I think that Kevin Adams tried and tried and tried and tried. There were a bunch of teams reportedly involved and asking about Taylor Hall. And I think if there wasn't a no movement clause in Taylor Hall's contract and the Sabres could trade him wherever they wanted, I think the bounty for Taylor Hall would have been a lot more. But the fact that he had it in there and he picked Boston, said, I will not go to any other team but the Boston Bruins, it really, really handcuffed general manager Kevin Adams, and he got all that he could. This is how I break the trade down, though. I break the trade down because there was some surprising pieces in this, and the biggest surprising piece was obviously Curtis Lazar. We didn't even think that he was in line for being traded from the Buffalo Sabres. But he was like, I don't think he was a throw-in piece, but Boston liked his game, liked what he would bring. In my opinion, he is the type of player that you want on your fourth line going into the playoffs. He's gritty. He gets to the front of the net. He has some scoring capabilities. And again, going into the playoffs, that's the type of players that you need in order to win come playoff time. So how I broke this trade down again was Taylor Hall for a second-round pick. That's a meh trade. It obviously benefits the Boston Bruins more than it does the Buffalo Sabres. And then we traded Curtis Lazar for Anders Bjork. And Bjork, if you go back and you look at him as a prospect, now Lazar's 26, Bjork is only 24. Bjork had a very solid time in college. He was a pretty good prospect in college. He was only a fifth-round pick. Curtis Lazar was a first-round pick. But he does appear to have, over the course of their seasons, has a little bit more offensive upside than does Curtis Lazar. And people were, you got the writers in Buffalo saying, no fucking way. There's no way he's got more offensive upside. Bjork's got 5 points. Lazar's got 9 points or 10 points or whatever he's got right now. And over the course of their careers, I think you really seen what Curtis Lazar is. He's plateaued right at where he's going to be. And I think that given a little bit more of an opportunity, Anders Bjork may turn into, a third-line guy that can put up 25, 30 points for you, in which case that trade would be a very welcomed sight for the Buffalo Sabres. Their career numbers, Curtis Lazar scores .22 points per game, or 18 points over a full 82-game season, and Anders Bjork scores .28 points per game, or 23 points over an 82-game season. So again, a little bit more of an offensive upside Bjork does have than Curtis Lazar, and I think that the Sabres are really banking on giving him an opportunity in these next 15 games with all the young guys, giving him lots of ice time on the power play, and hoping that he really starts to come into his own and be the player that I think the Boston Bruins thought he was going to be. The Boston Bruins fans all seem to really like him. There was a bunch of things on Twitter saying, the Sabres got a good one because they never really gave him a chance in Boston. He never averaged over 13 games or 13 minutes a game in any season that he's played in the NHL. And I mean, this grade overall, I graded this as a C. I graded it as a C. I might get some hate for it. People might give me shit in the comments, but I graded it as a C. And it's just because it's a meh. It's meh. It's one of those trades. Meh. It's not great. Don't get me wrong. If I had to pick a winner and a loser, Boston won that trade. Again, don't get me wrong. But given the circumstances of everything that I talked about, the no movement clause, the vastly underperformance of Taylor Hall, I gave this trade a C. And overall, for the trade deadline, it comes out to a C+ from Kevin Adams. There's nothing in this trade deadline that is going to blow anybody away. It's something that the Sabres acquired some picks. They acquired a second-round pick, 2/3, a fifth, and Anders Bjork, essentially for Eric Staal, Brandon Montour, Taylor Hall, and Curtis Lazar. It's not great realistically, but when you have UFAs, and the UFAs had underperformed essentially all season long. I know the names are big, but the performance also has to be there for teams to want to give you more value for the player. They are bigger names, but the value just wasn't there this season for the Buffalo Sabres, and it's really unfortunate because it could have set them up long term, but it is what it is. The season has been a complete wash, although the Sabres have looked a lot more fun under Granato these last month and a half or so, and that's what we can look forward to. We can look forward to watching the young guys play. We can look forward to them growing. They have looked very good. Another thing that Adams didn't do, which a lot of fans wanted him to do, was trade Linus Ullmark. There were reports that were coming out that goaltender Linus Ullmark was going to test free agency, and if that was the case, a lot of Sabres fans said, deal him right now. Deal him right now. You got to trade him. You got to get what you can for him. And I mean, I can understand why Adams didn't want to trade him. This next month or so is going to give him a little bit more time to try to talk to the agent of Linus Ullmark and see if they can't say, like, hey, you're going to be the number one guy in Buffalo. We're going to give you a good contract. We lowballed you before, but we're not going to lowball you this time, and really sit down at the table and hash it out, because realistically, Kevin Adams, there's nothing else out there that Kevin Adams is, that's going to be better than Linus Ullmark. We might, unfortunately, when you have a shit team, you have to overpay for players. You might have to overpay for Linus Ullmark. I think I said 4 years, $20 million, or 4 years, $22 million would put you in line. If you have to give Linus Ullmark 6 years, $30 million, or 6 years, $35 million, I think you do it. And then at some point you can trade him if you get another goalie that comes in, and you can eat some of his salary too if it really comes to it. But Linus Ullmark at this point is the only goaltender you have in your organization that is NHL caliber at all. So you have to do everything you can to keep him in this organization. We have some prospective goalies, but they are just years away. So signing Linus Ullmark and then going out and getting a competent backup is really the only thing the Sabres can do heading into next season. Again, it comes out to a C+ grade. I wish they would have done more. There was other guys I really wanted to unload for the Buffalo Sabres, but it is what it is. The Sabres trade deadline has come and gone. Tell me what you guys think in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe. If you're listening to me on any of the major podcasting websites, tell your friends, tell your family. Check me out. You can check me out on Twitter. Follow me, Sports Talk Buff 1. You can email me at sportstalkbuffalo@yahoo.com or sportstalkbuffalo@gmail.com. That's going to do it for this week. Have a good one.